Hi, Nathan. I'm Amara. I am in Yup for the, forgot what the name is. Okay, I'm in Yup. That's a youth group, and we're doing interviews for a youth story time. So, please introduce yourself, name, pronouns, location, church of origin, and favorite treat.
So my name is Nathan. I am a minister, Nathan Ryan, I guess. I'm a minister in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm from New Orleans and Slidell, which is a suburb of New Orleans, I guess. Uh, Favorite treat? Donuts. Like specifically the good kind of sprinkle donuts, not the long flat ones, but the circles.
That's a good choice.
Great choice. The long ones are no good. They don't have enough crunch to them.
I agree. I don't like the long ones. They're always a little weird, either a little too soft or a little too crunchy. And I
Yeah,
just,
yeah. You know your donut. That's good.
yeah, I'm a little new. I was dairy allergic for like the first decade of my life. But
So the donut world has opened up to you recently.
yes, but I got into it. Okay. Um, I'm Amara, she, they, it, as you can see on the screen. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And my favorite treat is just really whatever treat we have around. I do love a sweet treat. Um, but yeah, so, oh, how are we connected?
So I know you from when I was the a youth advisor at the Mountain. I was the ascender mentor for your mom,
Okay.
and they reached out to me and said, "Would you talk about your experience as a youth?" And I said yes.
Well, I did not know that.
So what would you like to know? How can I fill your
Yeah.
video?
Well, so what are you doing now? Just in your life for work or new you USM?
So I'm the senior minister at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. We're a church that's got 400-ish members. Uh, and I was raised obviously UU. My wife, her name is Lauren. She was also raised Unitarian Universalist. We met at a youth rally. See, you all called them cons way back in the day. We called them rallies. But we met at a youth rally. We didn't start dating then. In college, we reconnected and started dating. Actually, when I knew your mom, I called Lauren my significant friend because we weren't allowed to talk about our relationships. Um, yeah, do you want me to tell you a little of the youth story for me, or?
Sure, go for it.
So where I was raised was a pretty regressive place, not New Orleans, but the city I grew up in outside of New Orleans. They did not like basically any deviation from the norm, and I deviated just enough to have my life kind of be miserable. And eventually, my parents started bringing me to the Unitarian Church in New Orleans, and there was a youth group there. And once a month or two, we'd go to a rally in a different state, and it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. In high school, I knew I wanted to be a minister because of those experiences, not because I realized I had to preach or do any of the stuff. Just I thought I should serve my people and keep this going. Um, in college, I reconnected with someone I knew from Why Are You You or from youth stuff, and we started dating. When I moved to Austin after I graduated, I had no I didn't know what I was doing. And so I actually roomed with someone who I knew from youth group. And then when she moved away, I roomed with two other people I knew from youth group. The two of them are now married and have kids. And then my now wife and I got married, and I became the director of religious education at a UU church in Austin for about 3 or 4 years before I went to seminary and then wound up back in Louisiana.
That's nice. Is the church you grew up in and the one you are minister in the same one or a different
No,
one?
different ones. The one I grew up in was in New Orleans and in a suburb of New Orleans called Lacombe, and this one's in Baton Rouge.
Well, that's nice. So I was, so do you like teachers or mentors that were like reasons why you possibly stayed in there or stayed in the USM or anything else?
Yeah, so there was a whole network of adults who helped kind of bring me into adulthood. Youth advisors, a couple of ministers, and some DREs who really kind of helped me be okay. Um, my youth advisor came to my ordination when I was ordained 12 years ago. Uh, the other youth advisor who was there, he just died last month.
Oh no,
Sorry, surprise. As you age, that kind of stuff happens. But the what I mean is that there are these connections that are sort of built and threaded throughout life, like well beyond just some adult volunteering for 2 or 3 years to help some youth kind of become adults, right? Like there's deeper connections that I think are formed.
that's nice. Have you mentored anyone while you've been a minister?
Oh, I'm sure, but I couldn't tell you who they are or if it had any impact. You don't really know if you have an impact for a long time, I think.
I guess so. So, how did you like choose this or get into this particular church to become their minister? I don't really understand how that
The
works.
process. So I knew I wanted to be a minister in high school, which is not a great time to want to know to be a minister because you're supposed to live more life than I had lived. Um, it, supposed to is not the right word.
You're just
So in
preaching in the cafeteria
well,
and tell everyone
no,
in the
I
cafeteria
didn't know
about
you had to
love and
preach.
life.
I actually did not know preaching was a part of the job. Um,
Oh no.
yeah, no, I found that out later. That was not a welcome surprise. Uh, what I mean by that is a bunch of the people in the church, you have to be old. Ministry only works if people that you serve believe it works. And if I was too young, a lot of people I feared may have cut me off from it. So what I did, I actually applied. So to become a minister, you have to go to graduate school, but it doesn't matter what your undergrad is in, which is one of the reasons why it's bad to want to be a minister as young as I did, because it didn't matter what I majored in. I just majored in whatever I wanted. Um, and so I didn't do well in college because of that. Uh, and so I applied to one of the seminaries when I was in college, and I just decided I needed more life experience. So I moved to Texas. I like substitute taught for 2 years, which was miserable, absolutely miserable. And I taught Sunday school actually at two of the UU churches to sort of counterbalance how miserable being a substitute teacher was. And through doing that, they invited me to be the religious educator at one of the churches. And I loved that job. It was great. I don't know if I answered your question. I may have just rambled in a circle.
No, no, you did great.
All right, good.
Oh, that's like exactly what I want you to do. Just keep rambling on.
I can ramble with the best of them. What else would you like me to ramble on?
Well, I know you worked at the mountain or
Mhm.
volunteered at the mountain. Um, so I know the mountain is really close to UUSM. So how did you find yourself at the mountain?
A little. So, you know, my youth experience was pretty profound as a UU, and I wanted to keep that going. And there's a pretty steep drop off from youth where being an active youth into college. Um, so let me kind of drive around the building to get to the parking spot. So my experience of college, I don't know what the status is of youth work or specifically like youth work in your region or for the UUA. Like, do y'all have
Getting
comps and
paid,
things like
so
that?
that's nice.
What?
We're not getting paid, that's nice.
But like, do you have things you go to fairly often? As
Um, unless I'm working, not really.
Oh, because when I was a youth, every month or two would go to another church, and there'd be 100 other UU youth there. Um, and and so I was looking to, and so when I went to college, I was expecting to have that experience replicated. But really, the freedom that I got from being Unitarian Universalist, which allowed me to kind of experiment with being a independent. When I got to college, all these people who lived in these real regressive households were all of a sudden experiencing this freedom, and it was really boring to me. Like, they were like, "Oh my gosh, we can finally curse or whatever the thing is," and it wasn't appealing to me at all, right?
Yeah, you just wanted to
So,
go to church.
I did, or I wanted to be around other people who understood, like, I was never leaving a church that told me I was evil or, um, that told me I had to be a certain gender or a certain sexuality. Like, I never had to rebel against any of that. I could be who I was. And to be around all these people who are like for the first time being who they are, how do I put it? It's just not, I had already done that, you know? Like, I don't know if you've had that experience. Like you've kind of gone through some of that work and now you're watching other people do it. But anyway, so I was like, how can I get this again? Because I didn't have a car, I couldn't get to the local church. And I just Googled like UU camps, and I found there was one in North Carolina, and so I applied for it, and I went. And most of the people there knew each other from going to the mountain. I didn't know anybody, but I went and I had a great time.
Did it replicate in any way your UU experience previously from before?
Yes and no. So I think that what I experienced in high school was only possible because I was in high school and because of the other people who are around. And it could not by design replicate that. However, it did feed the same roots that needed feeding, if that makes sense. Right. Like, when you're growing a plant and it's little, it needs a different kind of nutrients than when it's bigger. And when there's flowers, it needs different nutrients than when there's fruit. And when you get fruit, you got the fruit, but the flowers are gone. It's still the same
Yeah.
plant, and you still need water and sunlight and all of that.
Hmm.
But it's just something different. So I guess that's a long way to say yes and no.
Okay. So when you were a youth, you said you wanted to be a minister.
Mhm.
So were you like following around your local minister or something?
I was
Started
paying,
asking them a lot of questions.
I did. I paid attention to what they did, and I paid attention to where they went to seminary. And I didn't ask too much because I kind of didn't want the attention of them, like, saying, "Oh, you should go." But I was paying attention to what they did. Not really knowing what the job was, but knowing I loved this faith and I wanted to stay with it. And I didn't know it at the time, but I think part of me knew it, that like the thing that I had in high school was going to die, and that I wanted to keep whatever was left after it.
Did you make any like possibly lifelong friends? I already know you married someone from that you met in
It has
UUism, but
it's been weeks since I've talked to someone that I knew from my youth group. Literally 2, maybe 3 weeks. Um, no, yeah, it's I'm gonna throw another sad thing at you. Are you ready?
all right, let's go.
Um, Last year, someone who I grew up with from church died.
Oh
Um,
no.
and he found himself through the youth programming. And the people who did his memorial were the people he knew from being Unitarian Universalist youth. All of us in our 30s or 40s, we put together the service for him because his family had already, his the older generations of his family had already died. I mean, it was a sad story, but because of the connections he made then, we were able to build something together. And when we all got together for his memorial and the celebration, like the reception, we went to someone's house after,
Yeah.
all of our kids played together. And that was the first time. So my kids are like 4 and 6. It was the first time my kids, I guess they were 3 and 5 then. But that's the first time they played by themselves. Like little kids, you got to keep an eye on. But within a UU context, they had the freedom to go be themselves. So there's back to that three generations thing, right?
Hmm. Oh, you're talking about me, my mother, and my grandfather?
Yeah.
So, how did you beat my grandfather? I
Well,
know
that
he
was
was
awkward.
somewhere important in the mountain, but at some
No, it
point.
wasn't the mountain. It was awkward. There's a panel you have to interview with to be a minister, and he was on that panel.
Oh.
So, so yeah. So I had to interview with someone. He had no clue who I was, as it related to his kid. But yeah, I knew I knew who he was. So, and they passed me for whatever that's worth.
I think I remember my grandfather talking about one of those.
Did he say like there's a really awkward 30-something-year-old white man um, who I passed only because he worked with my kid? Is that what he said? I'm pretty sure that's it.
But I don't think that was the story. But, luckily enough, you passed. You seem to
Yeah.
love being a minister. Well, I'm hoping. Are you
No,
loving
it's a
being a
great,
minister?
it's a great and hard job. So it's to care about people knowing that they're going. This goes back to the death thing. You want to serve people knowing that you're gonna help see their children be born and help them go through all the stages of life, which include death. So it's a hard job, but it's building the faith that gave me so much that I can keep
Hmm.
going.
So I was wondering, how long have you been with your congregation?
12 years or 13, depending on how you do the math. Can I
Oh,
ask
that's
you,
nice. Yeah, sure, go for it.
when I was in high school, I had this feeling of when I graduate or when I'm done, sort of this pushed off the cliff feeling like now it's all over and there's nothing left. Is that part of what you think you and your cohort's going through?
Um, well, I agree, maybe so, particularly since the pandemic.
Hmm.
I haven't seen a lot of the people I made friends with in church since 2020. Um, and even after we met like again for events, it was like a while, it was a few years. People were taller and stuff, very different. We weren't as close, and we also weren't as young.
Hmm.
Um, and I went to General Assembly because now that's most of my experience with um the UU youth of my age. Um, and maybe so. We don't particularly have as many events anymore and such. So that's probably one of the reasons I wanted to set this up.
And that makes me sad. Because those were the ways that I got to know myself. I mean, every generation there's something different, and no one can control the pandemic. But it both was a terrible loss, and it was also perfectly okay, if that makes sense. So I did
Does
all the
it?
stuff I was afraid of losing, I lost, and
Okay.
I lost none of it. So, which seems contradictory, but I
I think something can be truthful if it's not contradictory.
yeah, I mean, like it's true that as you age, you lose some of the things you used to have, right? So the things that you have right now as a youth, some of them will go away, but more will stay with you than I expected to have stayed with me, right?
Eventually I was going to ask you if you had any final words for the youth, but those might be some pretty good ones.
Those are pretty down though. Um,
Yeah, you want to have some more cheerful final words or something?
so I actually in our church we don't bridge youth into young adulthood. we name them as adults and have them connected to lifelong Unitarian Universalists. Because I think there is something fundamentally different about people who choose the religion as adults versus people for whom their parents chose the religion for them. I never had to choose to be UU. I did have to choose whether or not to be UU. And I don't have to unlearn sort of all of the messages about original sin or God is an angry, punishing, all of that stuff I never had to deal with, right? I never had to worry about it. My wife and I can trust each other on, um, we can trust each other about our relationship because we were both raised with AYS or OWL for, today. There is just something fundamental about being raised Unitarian Universalist that will never, ever go away. And even though at some point when I was in my 20s, I found out how human the church was and how much it could fail, uh, it's still a different experience than someone who chooses it as an adult. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
Well, I was
we bridge the youth into adulthood as Unitarian Universalists, because then it's not going from one group that's pretty strong into young adulthood, which can crumble a little.
yeah, particularly since a lot of youth becoming young adults don't come back.
I think more of them come back than we know. We just don't know how to measure it directly.
Yeah, probably. And also, the pandemic's not a particularly good time to start trying to measure things.
This is going to mess with us for the rest of our lives. Like, we don't know, like my grandparents were Great Depression kids and they like hoarded shoelaces and stuff. Like, it's going to do something to all of us. We don't know what it'll do, but it's going to be with us for a long time. See, I gave you good closing words and then
It's fine.
more tough stuff.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
This was delightful. I love the stories. Um, and I was happy you were able to come and you decided to answer my email.
Yeah, of course. Good luck with this and let me know how I can help in the future.
Okay, great. I surely will answer you if we need something else in the future.
All right. It was good talking to you all, both of you.